Executives, if you've got vested options and you're thinking about exercising, stop and watch this first. Before you hit confirm, there are 5 questions you'll need to answer. Many can only answer 2, and the missing 3 are where the surprise tax bills come from. I worked with an executive who exercised a block of option and found out in April that he owed $200,000 more than he expected. Not because he made a bad decision, because he made an uninformed one. The exercise takes seconds. The tax consequence is sitting on your return for 12 months. And the questions that determine how it lands are planning questions, the kind that nobody asks until it's already done. Here's why this one transaction matters more than any other in your comp package. A single click can create ordinary income, AMT exposure, or both, and it can lock up a 6-figure cash obligation on shares you haven't even sold a single one of. Every one of those outcomes is predictable before the trade. None of them gets modeled because the exercise screen doesn't ask and your CPA doesn't until it sees the years closed. So I'm going to give you the 5 questions to answer before you exercise anything: your real tax rate, your AMT exposure, your cash gap, and whether you even want the trade, and the one nobody thinks about until it's too late. The last one can rip up the entire decision out of your hands before you're ready. A clock you don't know is ticking. I'll get to it at the end because it's the one that turns a good decision into a forced one. If you've got options sitting in a portal and nobody has ever modeled what exercising them actually does to your year, subscribe. This channel is built for exactly that decision. I'm Klemm, founder of Inflection Point Wealth Management. We help executives coordinate equity compensation with the rest of their financial life. These 5 are planning questions, not tax prep questions, and that distinction is the whole video. Everything here is education and illustrative, not advice, not a single stock pick. Stay to the end and you'll have 5, including the one number you should calculate before you exercise a single ISO and the deadline many executives don't realize is already running. Question 1. What is your actual marginal tax rate this year? The first question sounds obvious, and many executives are sure they know the answer. They don't. I don't mean your headline salary rate. I mean your rate on the exercise spread after everything else stacks on top of it. In 2026, the IRS has assigned married filing jointly. The 37% bracket starts at $768,000 of taxable income. 35% starts at $512,000. Single filers hit 37% at $640,000. The standard deduction is $32,000 for couples, $16,000 for single. Now picture a married executive. $350,000 salary, a $200,000 RSU vest, and a $150,000 option spread, all in the same year. That's $700,000 of income. After the standard deduction, he's sitting around $668,000 of taxable income, squarely in the 35% bracket. And one more vest or a big spread tips him over $768,000 into the 37%. But in his head, he's still a 32% guy because he's never stacked all 3 events in one year. Why does this matter? Because your marginal rate is what every additional dollar of spread costs. Depending on where you actually land, $10,000 of spread costs you anywhere from $2,400 to $3,700 in federal tax, and that difference is exactly what decides whether you should exercise now or push it into January. Your CPA hasn't run this number because they see your income after the year closes, not before you click. Knowing your rate is step 1. Step 2 is knowing which tax system you're even calculating under, because for half of you, it isn't the one you think. Question 2, ISO or NSO, and where's your crossover? ISOs and NSOs are taxed in completely different universes at exercise. An NSO spread is ordinary income on your W-2 the year you exercise. An ISO spread is 0 regular tax at exercise, but the entire bargain element gets added to a parallel return called the AMT. And that parallel return has a tipping point I want you to know by name. For 2026, the IRS has assigned the AMT exemption of $140,000 for couples, $90,000 for single, and under the new tax law, it phases out faster, starting at $1 million of AMT for couples, $500,000 for single at 50 cents on the dollar instead of 25. Above the exemption, AMT runs 26% up to $244,500 and 28% beyond. What all of that produces for you specifically is a number, the exact quantity of ISO shares you can exercise this year before the parallel tax switches on. I call it your AMT crossover. Below your crossover, your exercise ISOs and owe no AMT. One share above it, and you've tripped a 6-figure cash obligation on stock you haven't sold. Many executives have no idea their crossover exists. They exercise the whole grant and meet it in April. Here's the cash flow version. Executive A exercises in January and has 11 months to plan for the bill. Executive B exercises in December and discovers it in April with no shares sold to cover it. Same spread, same exercise, completely different outcomes, decided by the calendar. And if you hold ISOs, know the qualifying disposition rules. 2 years from grant, 1 year from exercise, and the whole gain is long-term capital gains. Miss either clock, and it's a disqualifying disposition, ordinary income. The ISO treatment is there to be used when it fits, not chased when it doesn't. Let me be honest with you about why all of this lands on you. It's right there in the title. Your CPA won't ask these, and that's not to knock on them. Your CPA's job is to take what already happened and report it correctly. Modeling a decision before you make it, running your crossover, your stacked marginal rate, your cash gap, that's a different job on a different timeline, and almost nobody is sitting in that seat for you. So it falls to the one person who didn't know it was theirs to own. That's the whole reason this channel exists. Question 3. What does this do to your withholding gap? AMT is the headline risk on ISOs, but even if you never trip it, there's a cash gap hiding in every exercise that many executives don't see until December. Federal supplemental withholding is a flat 22% up to $1 million of supplemental wages. Your real marginal rate, as we just established, is likely 32, 35, even 37%. That's a 10 to 15 point gap on a big spread. On a $200,000 NSO spread, your employer withholds $44,000. But at a 35% rate, you actually owe $70,000. The $26,000 difference is due April 15th. Not a penalty, not an error, just a timing mismatch between what payroll must withhold and what you actually owe. Now here's where some content gets the safe harbor part wrong, so let me be precise. Paying 110% of last year's tax, the high earner safe harbor, may protect you from the underpayment penalty, no matter how large this year's exercise is. A big exercise can't blow past safe harbor. You stay penalty safe. But safe harbor does not shrink the bill. You still owe the balance in April. So if your goal is no surprise, not just no penalty, you fund the actual liability with estimated payments, not the safe harbor minimum. For ISOs, there's often zero withholding at exercise, so the AMT bill is entirely yours to fund. If you exercised earlier in the year and haven't made a payment, that gap is already building. If you'd rather know your crossover and your real cash gap before you exercise instead of after, that's the conversation, links in the description. Now you know the tax costs, the next question is whether you should exercise at all. An unexercised option is a leveraged long position with built-in downside protection. You control the shares without putting up the capital. Your loss is capped and the upside is amplified. The point for this checklist is simpler. The default is to treat options like a cash bonus waiting to be collected, but exercising early just converts that leverage into a concentrated single stock position sooner than you had to. One executive needs liquidity for a life event, exercise and sell. Another is 5 years out, no cash need, and is throwing away valuable optionality by exercising into more company stock. Same instrument, opposite right answers. Exercising isn't wrong. Exercising without asking whether you actually want that bet, that's the mistake. And here's the one I promised, the variable that can force the whole decision before you're ready, and has nothing to do with the stock price. When you leave, a clock starts. Post-termination exercise windows are typically 90 days for ISOs, and after 90 days, unexercised ISOs usually convert to NSOs and lose the preferential treatment entirely. NSO windows may be longer, but read your grant agreement. Some are 90 days, some longer, very few are open-ended. The clock starts the day you're terminated, not the date you decide. So picture being handed this under pressure. Leave with underwater options and it's easy. You let them expire. But leave with deep in the money options in a 90-day window and you're suddenly forced to find the cash to exercise, the cash to cover the tax, and the stomach to hold the stock. All at once on a deadline with no time to model any of it. That's the difference between making the decision and having it made for you. Know the clock before it starts running. Those are the 5. 1, your real marginal rate this year after everything stacks, not your salary rate. 2, ISOs or NSO and where your AMT crossover sits before you exercise a single ISO. 3, the withholding gap and the funding the actual bill, not just the safe harbor minimum. 4, whether you even want the trade or you're giving up leverage you should keep. 5, the 90-day clock. answer before it even starts. If you can't answer all 5 before you exercise, the exercise waits until you can. So here's your question. Do you have options you're thinking about exercising this year, and can you answer all 5? If you can't, that's what a conversation is for. If you want your crossover, your stacked rate, your cash gap modeled against your actual grant before you click anything, the calendar link is in the description. No pitch, just your numbers. And if a colleague is about to exercise on autopilot, send them this before they hit confirm. I'm Aaron Klemm. See you in the next one.